The mansion was as lavish as one could imagine, its halls adorned with tapestries from distant lands, its windows framed in gold, and its gardens blooming with rare flowers from the farthest reaches of the realm. From the moment Beia was born, she was pampered, adored, and spoiled beyond measure. She never knew what it was like to want for anything. Silk dresses, jeweled tiaras, and the finest tutors filled her childhood. Every wish she expressed was granted without question, and every demand she made was met with immediate obedience. Beia grew up surrounded by luxury, never understanding the struggles of those less fortunate. She believed, as her parents had always told her, that their wealth set them apart, made them superior to others. This sense of superiority festered in Beia, shaping her into a girl who saw the world as hers to command. By the time she reached her teenage years, Beia's arrogance had blossomed into something toxic. She was quick to boast about her riches, flaunting her extravagant lifestyle in front of her friends. She never hesitated to remind them of their lesser status. Her closest companions, once girls she shared laughter and secrets with, became little more than props in her grand performance of superiority. "Did you see the new gown my father had made for me?" Beia would ask, her voice dripping with condescension as she twirled in a dress stitched with golden thread. "It's from the finest tailor in the capital. I doubt any of you could ever afford something like this." Her friends, Lila, Marie, and Estelle, would exchange uneasy glances but say nothing. Beia had a way of cutting people down with her words, and they feared her sharp tongue. They didn't want to lose her friendship, but they also couldn't ignore the growing rift between them. Beia's arrogance was suffocating, and it pushed her friends further away with each passing day. Yet Beia remained blind to the damage she was causing. In her mind, her wealth and status made her untouchable. Her father, Lord Cedric, was revered by the kingdom's nobility, and her mother was the epitome of grace and refinement. Beia saw herself as their reflection, perfect, powerful, and deserving of admiration. She believed she had every right to look down on those who had less, as if wealth alone determined a person's worth. As the years passed, Beia's behavior only grew worse. She treated the servants in her family's mansion with disdain, snapping at them for the smallest perceived mistake. "You're lucky to be working here," she would say, "otherwise, where would you go? You wouldn't last a day outside these walls." Her parents, too preoccupied with their own lives, failed to see the growing darkness in their daughter's heart. They praised her beauty, intelligence, and poise, never realizing that they were fueling her inflated ego. To them, Beia was perfect, and they encouraged her to think the same. Everything changed the day her father was crowned king. The King of Elmridge, an aging monarch with no heirs of his own, had always been fond of Lord Cedric. He admired his wisdom and leadership and often sought his counsel on matters of state. When the king fell ill and knew his time was nearing its end, he made the decision to name Cedric as his successor, believing he would be the best choice to lead the kingdom into a prosperous future. The announcement of Cedric's coronation as king sent shockwaves through the kingdom, elevating their family from nobility to royalty. Beia, already accustomed to the highest levels of privilege, now found herself in the position of a princess. The title only served to magnify her arrogance. Now, she didn't just see herself as wealthy, she saw herself as royalty, above reproach, above everyone. As princess, Beia strutted through the castle halls, wearing gowns encrusted with jewels, her chin held high in the air. She gave orders to the servants with an air of superiority, never once considering their feelings or the effort they put into their work. She treated her friends as if they were subjects, people to be commanded rather than cherished. During one lavish banquet held in honor of her father's coronation, Beia sat at the head of the table, surrounded by nobles and dignitaries from all corners of the kingdom. Her friends sat farther down the table, feeling more like outsiders than ever before. Beia, oblivious to their discomfort, turned to them with a smirk. "I can't believe how grand this banquet is," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "I doubt any of you have ever experienced something like this. But of course, not everyone can live like royalty." Lila, Marie, and Estelle exchanged uncomfortable glances, their faces growing warm with embarrassment. They had once loved Beia for her charm and wit, but now they could barely stand to be in the same room as her. Beia's arrogance had poisoned their friendship, and they didn't know how to bridge the gap that had formed between them. Later that night, after the banquet had ended and the guests had gone, Beia retired to her luxurious chamber. The room was grand, with silken curtains, plush carpets, and a bed large enough to fit several people. But as she lay in her bed, the weight of the day's events pressed down on her. She didn't feel content or happy, despite her new title. Something gnawed at her, a feeling she couldn't quite place. As she drifted off to sleep, her mind was restless, turning over thoughts of power, wealth, and her friends. That night, Beia had a dream unlike any other. In the dream, she stood in front of her family's mansion, but something was horribly wrong. The once grand estate was in ruins. The walls were crumbling, the golden trim had turned to rust, and the gardens that had once bloomed with exotic flowers were now choked with weeds. The sky above was a dull, lifeless gray, and a cold wind blew through the desolate landscape. Beia's heart raced as she ran toward the mansion, her footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. She called out for her father, for her mother, but there was no response. The mansion was empty, devoid of the warmth and life it had once held. Panic surged through her chest as she sprinted from room to room, searching for any sign of life. In the grand dining hall, she saw a reflection of herself in a shattered mirror. Her once beautiful gown was tattered, her hair wild and unkempt. She looked nothing like the princess she had believed herself to be. Her reflection sneered back at her, mocking her for the vanity and arrogance that had brought her to this moment. Tears welled up in her eyes as she ran out of the mansion and into the cold, barren fields that surrounded it. Desperately, she searched for her friends, hoping they could help her. But when she found them, they stood in a group, their faces cold and distant. "Lila, Marie," Estelle B. cried out, rushing toward them. "Please help me." But the three girls turned away from her, their expressions filled with sadness and disappointment. "Why should we help you?" Lila asked, her voice calm but firm. "You've treated us like we're beneath you. You've made it clear that you think you're better than us because of your wealth and power." "I didn't mean it," Beia stammered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't realize." "You never cared about us," Estelle interrupted. "You only cared about yourself." Beia fell to her knees, her heart breaking. "Please forgive me. I can't do this alone." But her friends walked away, leaving her in the empty field. The loneliness that engulfed Beia in that moment was unlike anything she had ever felt. She had always been surrounded by people, by luxury, by power. But now, she had nothing. As she wept, the dream shifted, and Beia found herself in a strange, barren land. The sky was a swirling mass of storm clouds, and the earth beneath her feet was cracked and dry. She was completely alone, with no one to turn to, no wealth to comfort her. The emptiness pressed in on her from all sides, suffocating her with its weight. In the distance, she saw a faint figure approaching. It was an old woman, hunched over and dressed in rags. Her face was wrinkled, and her eyes were filled with sorrow. Bee tried to run toward her, but her legs felt heavy, as if she were moving through thick mud. The old woman stopped a few feet away and looked at Bee with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "You've lost everything," the woman said, her voice soft but haunting. "Not because of fate, but because of your own choices. You pushed away those who cared for you. You believed that wealth and power made you better than others. But now you see the truth." Bee's heart ached with regret. "I didn't know. I didn't understand." The old woman shook her head. "You were warned many times, but you refused to listen. Now you must face the consequences." As the woman's words echoed in Bee's ears, the world around her began to dissolve. With a gasp, Bee woke up, her heart pounding in her chest. She sat up in bed, her hands trembling as she clutched the silk sheets. Bee realized that her wealth and power did not define her worth, and she began treating everyone with kindness and humility. No longer arrogant, she apologized to her friends and worked hard to rebuild their trust. She treated the castle's servants with respect, helped those in need, and became known for her generosity and compassion. In time, her genuine efforts transformed her into a beloved princess, valued not for her riches but for her heart and humility.